3 weeks ago, I stood in front of 30 people and handed my husband $1,000 in cash. Then I asked him for a divorce, right there, at his boss's barbecue, with everyone watching. You should have seen his face. The color drained from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. His friends stopped mid-laugh. The music seemed to fade into nothing. And me? I felt more alive than I had in 6 years. My name is Laura. I'm 38 years old, and until that moment, everyone thought I was the perfect corporate wife. Polished, composed, the woman who smiled through everything. They had no idea what I'd discovered in the 3 weeks leading up to that moment. But before I tell you how I turned the tables on a man who thought he could humiliate me into submission, I need you to understand something. This isn't just my story. This is the story of every woman who's ever been underestimated. Every person who's ever been made to feel small by someone who claimed to love them. Before we continue, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel and help me reach my first 50 subscribers. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. Your participation means everything to me and motivates me to bring more stories like this one to you. Because what happened next, what I'm about to tell you, nobody saw coming. Not even me. And now I'm going to tell you how everything changed on that gray Tuesday afternoon when I stopped being a victim and became something much more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose. It started 3 weeks earlier at a backyard barbecue. Ricardo was drinking his 3rd beer, laughing with his college friends, telling stories I'd heard 100 times before. I was inside the kitchen helping his colleague's wife prepare the salad, being the good partner, playing my role. Then I heard it through the open window. $1,000 and I'd divorce her right now. The other men laughed. That ugly, knowing laugh men make when they think they're being honest about relationships. I froze, the tomato in my hand suddenly feeling like it weighed 10 pounds. Come on, man. Laura's great, someone said, but his tone was weak, obligatory. Yeah, she's great. Great at reminding me how I'm never enough. Great at making me feel like a kid in my own house. Great at... I walked outside before he could finish. $1,000? I said, my voice cutting through the conversation like a knife. That's all it would take? The silence that followed was suffocating. Ricardo's face did something strange, not embarrassed, not apologetic, defiant. It's just a joke, Laura. Don't be so sensitive. Don't be so sensitive. 4 words I'd heard 1,000 times, 4 words designed to make me question my own reality. To make me the problem instead of his cruelty. But something shifted in me that day. Maybe it was the way his friends avoided my eyes. Maybe it was the casual way he dismissed my pain as inconvenient. Maybe it was simply that I'd reached my limit. I went back inside. I finished the salad. I smiled for the rest of the afternoon, and then I went home and started digging. Because here's what I've learned in my 15 years as a commercial manager. When someone shows you who they are in public, believe them. And when someone makes a joke about destroying your life, it's not a joke at all. It's a confession. What I didn't know then was that Ricardo had been building toward this moment for months. That the joke wasn't spontaneous at all. It was strategic. But what I discovered in the following days would prove that I could be strategic too. And unlike him, I didn't need to announce my plans at a barbecue. I just needed to be patient, and I needed to follow the money. The first thing I did was nothing. I smiled at breakfast. I asked about his day. I acted exactly the same way I always had, while internally, everything was different. I had become a detective in my own marriage, and every conversation was now evidence. Ricardo had always handled our finances. He said it was easier that way, that I was too busy with work to worry about bills and investments. I'd agreed because it seemed reasonable, because I trusted him. That trust, I was about to discover, was the biggest mistake of my life. On Tuesday, while he was at work, I logged into our joint bank account for the first time in 2 years. My hands were shaking. I told myself I was overreacting, that I'd find nothing, that the joke at the barbecue was just him being stupid and drunk. But the numbers told a different story. Transfers I didn't recognize, monthly payments to an account I'd never seen, and then, buried in the transaction history from 6 months ago, a wire transfer of $15,000 to something called Cascade Holdings LLC. I sat there staring at the screen for 20 minutes. Then I called my brother, who works in forensic accounting. "Tell me about offshore accounts," I said. "Tell me how someone would hide money before a divorce." The silence on the other end of the phone was answer enough. "Laura," he said slowly, "what's going on? Just tell me." And he did. He told me about shell companies and international transfers, about how someone could systematically move assets out of reach while maintaining the appearance of normalcy, about how many divorces ended with wives discovering they were married to men who'd been planning their financial destruction for years. "The joke about divorce wasn't the beginning," my brother said. "It was the end. He's been preparing the exit." My hands were numb. My heart was racing. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage was dissolving in real time. But then I remembered something. A conversation from 3 months ago. Ricardo had been agitated, pacing the bedroom, talking on his phone in hushed tones. When I asked who it was, he said it was work. A difficult client. He'd said the same thing 5 times that month. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I titled it Evidence. And I started taking screenshots of everything. Every transaction, every unexplained payment, every inconsistency. If he was building a case to leave me with nothing, I would build a case of my own. But what I discovered next made the financial fraud look like child's play. Because Ricardo wasn't just hiding money. He was hiding someone. Her name was Julia, 27 years old, marketing coordinator at his company. And according to the text messages I found when I checked the phone bill online, they'd been together for 8 months. The messages were mundane at first, work stuff, friendly banter, but then they changed. By June, he was telling her he loved her. By July, he was promising her a future. By August, he was telling her that he was handling the Laura situation, and that soon they'd be free to be together openly. The Laura situation. That's what I'd become. A situation to be handled. I should have cried. I should have screamed. I should have thrown his belongings into the street and changed the locks. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I called the best divorce attorney in the city and made an appointment for the next morning. Then I called a private investigator. Then I called my accountant. And then I did something that surprised even me. I opened a bottle of wine, sat on the couch, and I smiled. Because Ricardo had made a critical error. He'd assumed I was weak. He'd assumed I'd fall apart. He'd assumed that his careful planning and his public humiliation tactics would break me before I could fight back. He'd forgotten that I'd spent 15 years negotiating with people who wanted to take advantage of me. He'd forgotten that I'd built a career on reading between the lines and anticipating moves before they were made. He'd forgotten who I was before I became his wife. But I was about to remind him, and what I learned over the next 2 weeks would give me everything I needed to destroy the trap he'd been building. But it would also force me to confront an uncomfortable truth about myself. I'd seen the signs. For months, maybe years, I'd seen them and chosen to look away. That was about to change too. My attorney's name was Victoria Chen, and she looked exactly like someone you'd want on your side in a war. Sharp suit. Sharper eyes. No sympathy, just strategy. "Tell me everything," she said. "And I mean everything. The affair, the money, the timeline. Don't leave anything out because you're embarrassed or because you think it doesn't matter. Everything matters." So I told her. About the offshore accounts and the shell company. About Julia and the 8 months of messages. About the joke at the barbecue and how it fit into a pattern of public humiliation that I'd been tolerating for years. "He's been building a narrative," Victoria said, "making you look unstable, overly sensitive, controlling. So when the divorce happens, everyone nods and says, 'Yeah, I could see why he left her.'" My stomach turned, because she was right. I could trace it back now. The little comments about my mood swings in front of friends. The eye rolls when I expressed an opinion. The way he'd frame every disagreement as me being dramatic. He'd been assassinating my character one dinner party at a time. "So what do?" I asked. Victoria leaned back in her chair and smiled. "We do exactly what he's doing, but better. We document everything. We build an airtight case, and we wait for exactly the right moment to strike." "What moment?" "The moment he thinks he's won." Over the next 10 days, I became someone I didn't recognize. I hired the private investigator, a woman named Rosa, who looked like a soccer mom, but had 20 years of experience catching cheaters. I gave her Ricardo's schedule, his car's license plate, Julia's address. Within 3 days, she had photographs, Ricardo and Julia at restaurants, at her apartment, at a hotel 40 miles outside the city. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. But Victoria told me to wait. "We need the financial forensics first," she said. "The affair is leverage. The money is the case." My brother worked with Victoria's team to trace the offshore accounts. It took 8 days, but they found it all. Cascade Holdings was just the first layer. Beneath it was a web of transfers to international accounts in the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg. Over the 6 years of our marriage, Ricardo had moved nearly $200,000 out of reach. Money that was legally half mine. Money he thought I'd never find. "He's been planning this for at least 18 months, my brother said. "Maybe longer. This isn't impulsive. This is premeditated financial fraud." I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt energized, because every piece of evidence we gathered was another nail in the coffin of his plan. But I needed one more thing, one final piece to make everything perfect. I needed him to think he was in control right up until the moment he lost everything. So I played the role he expected. I was quiet at home, accommodating. I didn't ask about his late nights or his mysterious phone calls. I smiled when he came home. I pretended nothing was wrong, and he believed it. Because men like Ricardo always believe their own press. They think they're so clever, so strategic, so untouchable. They never see the quiet woman in the corner documenting their downfall. 2 weeks after the barbecue, Ricardo announced another party. His boss was celebrating a promotion, and everyone was invited. The same crowd, the same backyard, another chance for Ricardo to perform his role as the charming, long-suffering husband. "We should go," he said. "It'll be good for us." Good for us. As if humiliating me in public was relationship therapy. "Absolutely," I said. "I wouldn't miss it." He looked surprised, maybe even suspicious. But then he shrugged and went back to his phone, probably texting Julia about his plans for later. What he didn't know was that I'd already coordinated with Victoria. The private investigator had just delivered the final packet of evidence. The forensic accounting was complete, and I'd withdrawn exactly $1,000 in cash from my personal account. Because if Ricardo wanted to make a joke about our marriage, I was going to make sure the punchline was mine. And what I did at that party would become the moment everything changed. Not just for me and Ricardo, but for every person there who'd watched him belittle me and said nothing. They were about to learn that silence has a price, and that underestimating a woman is the most expensive mistake a man can make. The barbecue started at 3 in the afternoon. Warm weather, cold beer, the same faces that had witnessed my humiliation 3 weeks earlier. I wore a white dress, simple, elegant, expensive. I wanted to look like someone who'd already moved on, someone who'd already won. Ricardo was in rare form, loud, confident, telling jokes and accepting congratulations for work I knew he hadn't done alone. Playing the role of the successful man trapped in an inconvenient marriage. I watched him from across the yard, and I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just a cold, clear understanding that this man had never loved me the way I deserved to be loved, and that I was about to be free. At 5 o'clock, Victoria texted me. "Ready when you are." I walked over to Ricardo's group of friends. They stopped talking when I approached, that awkward silence that had become familiar, the silence of men who knew they should defend me but didn't want to rock the boat. "Ricardo," I said. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" He sighed, performing annoyance for his audience. "Can it wait? We're in the middle of something." "No," I said. "It can't." Something in my tone made him pause. Maybe he heard the steel underneath the calm. Maybe some instinct told him that the game had changed. He followed me to a quieter corner of the yard, near the fence, where we had just enough privacy but were still visible to everyone. "What is it?" he asked, already pulling out his phone. I reached into my purse and pulled out 10 $100 bills. I counted them slowly. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. "You said $1,000 and you'd divorce me right now," I said, holding out the money. "So here's $1,000. His face went white, then red, then something I'd never seen before. Afraid. "Laura, what are you—" "I'm taking you up on your offer. I want a divorce. And I want it now." People were starting to notice. Conversations were stopping. Someone turned down the music. "You're insane," he hissed. "You can't just—" "I can, and I am." I dropped the money on the ground between us. "But here's the thing, Ricardo. You don't get to set the terms anymore. I do. I don't know what you think you know, but I know about Julia. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about Cascade Holdings and the $200,000 you've been hiding for the last 18 months. I know everything." The blood drained from his face completely now. He looked like he might be sick. "You've been following me?" "I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." Victoria appeared at the edge of the yard, perfectly on cue, carrying a leather portfolio. She walked over like she owned the place, which, in that moment, she basically did. "Mr. Almeida," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent yard. "I'm Victoria Chen, Mrs. Almeida's attorney. We need to discuss the terms of your divorce." Ricardo's boss stepped forward, confused. "What's going on?" "What's going on," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is that my husband has been systematically moving our assets offshore to hide them from me before filing for divorce. He's been having an affair with a colleague for 8 months, and 3 weeks ago he joked about divorcing me for $1,000, so I'm making it official." The silence was deafening. I could see faces in the crowd. Shock, discomfort, and on a few of the women's faces, something that looked like satisfaction. "You're embarrassing yourself," Ricardo said, but his voice cracked. "No," I said. "I'm freeing myself. There's a difference." Victoria opened her portfolio and handed Ricardo a document. "These are the terms of the divorce. We have complete financial disclosure of all accounts, domestic and international. We have documented evidence of adultery. We have proof of financial fraud and the systematic concealment of marital assets. You can sign now, or we can go to court, where all of this becomes public record. Your choice." Ricardo's hands were shaking. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw him clearly, not as my husband, not as my partner, as a small, frightened man who'd been caught. "You planned this," he said. "Yes, just like you planned to leave me with nothing. The difference is, my plan actually worked." He looked at the document, at Victoria, at the crowd of people watching his entire world collapse in real time. "If I sign this? Then it's over quietly. You keep your job, your reputation takes a hit but survives, and we never have to see each other again. If you don't sign, I file in court Monday morning, and every person in this city knows exactly what you are." I watched him process the math, the cost-benefit analysis, the same cold calculation he'd applied to our marriage. And then he signed. Victoria took the document, handed him a copy, and smiled. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Almeida." I picked up the $1,000 from the ground and put it back in my purse. Then I looked at Ricardo one last time. "You were right about one thing," I said. $1,000 was all it took. I just didn't realize until now that I'm worth so much more. Then I walked away, through the silent crowd, past the shocked faces, out to my car where my brother was waiting to drive me home. As we pulled away, I looked back at the barbecue one last time, at Ricardo standing frozen, at the life I was leaving behind, and I felt lighter than I had in years. But the story didn't end there. Because freedom isn't just about escaping, it's about what you build next. And what I built would surprise me most of all. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Ricardo tried to fight it, of course. He hired lawyers, filed motions, claimed I'd entrapped him. But Victoria had built a case that was airtight. Every attempt he made to challenge the terms only exposed more of his fraud. In the end, he gave up, signed everything, transferred half of every account, including the ones he'd hidden. The house went to me, the cars, the investments he'd tried to conceal. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted, but I also felt free. The first month was strange. I'd lived with Ricardo for 6 years, been with him for 8. I'd built my entire adult life around our partnership, our future, our shared dreams. Letting go of that, even when it was toxic, felt like amputating a limb. I cried more in those first weeks than I had during the entire divorce process. Not because I missed him, but because I was grieving who I'd been. The woman who'd accepted those jokes, who'd ignored the signs, who'd made herself smaller to make him feel bigger. That woman was gone, and I had to figure out who I was without her. My therapist said something that stuck with me. You can't heal what you don't acknowledge. So I acknowledged it all. The ways I'd abandoned myself, the red flags I'd overlooked, the voice inside that had been warning me for months that I'd chosen to silence. I made a promise to myself then. I would never again ignore that voice, never again make myself smaller, never again accept love that required me to diminish. 3 months after the divorce, I got a promotion at work, Senior Vice President of Commercial Operations. It should have been the highlight of my year, but honestly, it felt like the universe's way of confirming what I already knew. I'd always been capable of more. I'd just been spending my energy managing someone else's ego instead of building my own empire. I bought a smaller apartment in the city, modern, bright, nothing like the house Ricardo and I had shared. Every piece of furniture was mine. Every decision was mine. For the first time in my adult life, I was building a space that reflected who I actually was, not who I thought I should be. And slowly, I started to remember her. The woman I'd been at 25, before I met Ricardo. Confident, ambitious, unafraid to take up space. I started reclaiming pieces of her, the hobbies I'd abandoned, the friendships I'd neglected, the version of myself I'd traded for a marriage that was never going to work. My brother visited one Saturday morning, brought coffee and pastries, and we sat on my balcony watching the city wake up. "You seem different," he said. "Different how?" "Lighter, like you're not carrying something heavy anymore." He was right. The weight of pretending, of performing, of managing someone else's narrative about who I was had been crushing me. Now that it was gone, I could breathe. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "The way you did it? The public confrontation?" I thought about it for a long time. No, because if I'd done it privately, he would have spun it, made me the villain. This way, everyone knew the truth. They saw who he really was. Some people think you were too harsh. Some people always think women are too harsh when we stop accepting less than we deserve. He laughed. Fair point. But the truth was more complicated than that. Yes, I'd humiliated Ricardo publicly. Yes, I'd destroyed his carefully constructed image. And yes, part of me had enjoyed it. But the bigger truth was that I'd done what I needed to do to survive, to protect myself, to ensure that I wasn't the one left with nothing while he rode off into the sunset with his 27-year-old girlfriend and our hidden money. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Julia at a coffee shop downtown. She was sitting alone, looking tired, staring at her phone. I almost walked past, almost pretended I didn't see her. But something made me stop. "Julia," I said. She looked up, startled, then afraid. "Laura, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything, but I am." I sat down across from her. "Did you know? About the money, the planning?" She shook her head. "Not until after. He told me you were separated, that the marriage was over in everything but paperwork. I didn't know the truth until it all fell apart. And now? Now I realized that if he'd cheat with me, he'd cheat on me." She laughed, but it was bitter. "We lasted 2 months after the divorce. Then I found messages to someone new. I should have felt satisfaction, vindication. But instead, I just felt sad. Sad for both of us. Sad for all the women who'd believed Ricardo's lies. I hope you find someone who deserves you," I said. And I meant it. She looked surprised. "Thank you. I hope you do too." "I'm not looking," I said. "I'm building myself first. Everything else can wait." And that was the truth. I didn't need another relationship to validate me. I didn't need romance to feel complete. What I needed was to become the kind of woman who would never again accept the kind of treatment I'd tolerated from Ricardo. That night, I opened my journal and wrote something I'd never written before. I am enough, just as I am, without anyone's approval or validation. I am enough. It felt revolutionary. Like unlocking a door I'd been standing in front of my entire life without realizing I had the key. A year after the divorce, I started a support group for women going through similar situations. We met twice a month at a community center, shared stories, resources, legal advice, emotional support. I watched women walk in, broken, and walk out stronger. I watched them reclaim their power, their dignity, their futures. And in helping them, I healed parts of myself I didn't even know were still wounded. One woman asked me once, "Do you believe in love anymore? After everything?" "Yes," I said, "but I believe in self-love first. Because if you don't know your own worth, you'll accept anything from anyone." That became my mission. Not revenge, not bitterness, not warning women about men like Ricardo, but teaching women to recognize their own value, to trust their instincts, to never make themselves smaller for someone else's comfort. Ricardo, I heard through mutual acquaintances, moved to another city, started over. I don't know if he ever understood what he'd lost or what he'd done. I don't know if he ever took accountability for the pain he caused. And honestly, I don't care. His journey is his own. Mine is mine. My life now isn't perfect. I still have days where I doubt myself, where I wonder if I'm too hard, too guarded, too independent, where I wonder if I'll ever trust someone enough to let them close again. But then I remember that woman at the barbecue, the one who counted out $1,000 and took back her power. And I know that whatever comes next, I'll face it as myself, fully, completely, without apology. Because that's what freedom looks like. Not a fairy tale ending with a better man. Not a revenge story where the villain gets destroyed. But a woman who looked at her life, recognized it wasn't serving her, and had the courage to burn it down and build something new from the ashes. That woman is me. And I've never been prouder of who I am. If this story has taught me anything, it's that dignity isn't about how others treat you. It's about how you treat yourself. Ricardo spent years trying to make me feel small, insignificant, difficult, and for a long time, I believed him. I adjusted myself to fit his narrative. I accepted his version of reality as truth. But the moment I stopped accepting his reality and started trusting my own, everything changed. I'm not telling you this story to make you hate men, or to glorify divorce, or to suggest that public confrontation is always the answer. I'm telling you this story because somewhere, right now, someone is reading these words and recognizing themselves in my story. Someone is being made to feel like they're too sensitive, too demanding, too much. Someone is ignoring the warning signs because acknowledging them would mean blowing up their entire life. And I want that person to know, you already know the truth. You've always known it. That voice inside you that says something is wrong, that voice is right. Trust it. Document everything. Protect yourself. And when you're ready, take back your power. Not violently, not viciously, but strategically and completely. You deserve a partner who celebrates you, not one who diminishes you. You deserve love that feels safe, not love that requires you to constantly defend your right to have feelings. You deserve someone who would never make a joke about divorcing you because the thought would be too painful to even speak aloud. And if you're not getting that, you deserve the courage to walk away. It won't be easy. It will be terrifying and painful and lonely at times. There will be moments when you question everything, when you wonder if you made the right choice, when you're tempted to go back because the known pain feels safer than the unknown future. But I promise you this. On the other side of that fear is a version of yourself you've been waiting your whole life to meet. Strong, complete, unafraid, and worth so much more than $1,000. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. Tell me if you would have done something different in my situation. Your participation keeps this community alive, where we share stories about strength, dignity, and second chances. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just my story. It's ours. Every person who's ever had to choose between staying small or standing tall. Every person who's ever had to fight for their own worth. We are the authors of our own lives, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is pick up the pen and write a different ending. This is mine. What will yours be?